Guys, it's Gretch. I'm back today with another IGTV, a very informative one today. And I'm really going to be following my paperwork because I don't want to get off on a tangent and make this video 30 minutes long. I'm going to try to go through it quickly as I can. But today I want to discuss one of the most important key studies that we use to explain Iatrogenic Botulism Poisoning, or IBP. And I'm sorry for the herd elephants upstairs. That knocking and clanking around is my crazy kids. But I think that oftentimes, from what I hear from people, that they shy away from pulling up medical journals and studies because they think that they will somehow be challenging to interpret or understand. But the way that this review article is written and this study, the way the study was done, is so crystal clear. I think it is fantastic. And so the one we're going to be talking about today, the review article, is directly from the Journal of Bacteriology and Mycology, and it's published by the Austin Publishing Group. And the study is called the Impaired Neuronal Communication Syndrome, or INCS, as novel neurological side effect to botulinum A toxin therapy, and it analyzes 16 case reports. And I know you might be thinking that that is a small sample study, but once you see how long this study was conducted for, you'll understand the sample size. So this study was conducted by an amazing neurologist who has over 20 years of experience in the industry. She also has a near 5-star or 5-star on most site ratings for her practice, which, if you've ever looked at doctor reviews, that is nearly unheard of. She is just a fantastic researcher and an amazing physician. And she plays also a unique role in the history of Botox herself. She was the neurologist who testified against Allergan in the case that won $212 million verdict against Allergan for the patient, Mr. Douglas Ray, who experienced brain damage from off-label Botox injections. She testified that Allergan's sales force courted doctors like herself who treated patients for years with Botox while unaware of the risks that Botox had simply not been approved for those uses. And so it was proven in court that Allergan has known all along that the risks involved with toxin spread and brain damage are possible, specifically when it's used in off-label ways. And so I encourage everyone here to read up on that article summary of the case because it is truly eye-opening. And if you've had a chance to watch the podcast episode also in our IGTV, the Maria Marlowe podcast with Mr. Ray Chester, he was the trial lawyer who took the cases to court. And so it's very eye-opening, like I said, and I just want to say to people out there, we get a lot of questions sometimes, and unfortunately trolls who want to troll the page and tell us that, you know, I don't have a right, or we don't have a right to be putting this information out there. And that's just simply false. That's not true. And this is all public record information. And if you want to read it, I will definitely show you where to find it. Because we cannot put the blinders on anymore, and we cannot do the mental gymnastics that it takes that people are doing in order to justify putting the world's most deadliest toxin into their body. Okay, so to discuss the actual study. Dr. Hristova, obviously, for us in our group, in the bigger group that I'm a part of, her information is absolutely crucial to people who are currently struggling with this illness. So this particular study wants to be sure to differentiate itself from autoimmune reactions that are oftentimes sparked from botulinum use, because that happens too. Rather, the side effects that are shown that the patients experience in this study are not side effects that can show up on normal lab work or imaging results or neurological examinations like a sparked autoimmune disease can. So these are completely separate from that. So I just want to point that out. This study identifies that the side effects of botulinum toxin therapy can be severe, persistent, and disabling. And folks, that's why we exist. That's why Never Tox exists, is because of severe illness that my sister has experienced, and severe illness that others have experienced that I'm working with in a much larger group outside of Instagram. Many of you maybe have had a chance to watch some of the patient stories and videos on our page, and if you haven't, I encourage you to do that. Just a brief little rundown of my sister was that she had botulinum injections in the glabella area, just 30 injections one time, and she experienced toxin spread and severe illness that took her over 2.5 years to work through. And now, 5 years out, she is still suffering on and off, not as frequently, with relapses, and that's something that I'll talk about more in a minute. So Never Tox exists because we want to warn people. Our goal is to catch people before they decide to use botulinum, so that at least you are more aware of the possible side effects that can happen with its use. So I spend most of my late evenings and my early mornings chatting with people just like my sister who are severely ill from using botulinum. And it's not just people here in our country, this is globally, this is across the world. And Google Translate is my best friend. I literally translate messages back and forth to people all the time because people want answers and they don't understand why they are so sick and what is happening to them. And it is a really scary thing. And I'll talk about more of the symptoms here in a minute and the damage that this toxin can cause in your system. Once it goes systemic, there is no body system that is off limits to the damage of botulinum toxin. I have seen it ruin people's lives. I've seen it damage people's marriages. I've seen families break up all because of illness from this toxin. And so it means so much to us, to me, for every person out there that is sharing our page and spreading awareness, this message, because I just don't want anybody else to get hurt anymore. I don't want to see people's lives damaged in this way. So back to the study. That was a tangent. See, this is what I do. Sorry. Stay focused. Okay, so to break it down, the first page of the study, and I have the study here, is basically an introduction where it talks about botulinum, what it is and why it is used, and that because of so many thousands of injections that are being done worldwide, that there has been numerous double-blind trials taken place, and the consensus was generally that the product is regarded as safe. But that is until 2009 when the black box warning was issued for the product, and that is the very strictest warning that a product can carry by the FDA. That states that botulinum toxin A use can cause death and or disability. And in fact, that this obviously happened after multiple people experienced this, and Allergan was taken to court and had to pay millions of dollars in fines. And so that's, when that happens, that's when the FDA steps in and they are like, okay, we have to do something here. And if you recall, not that long ago, just last year, breast implants were also put into that category of carrying the black box warning, the strictest one available, whereas prior to last year, they didn't have that. So that's just a little bit introduction for you. So this study demonstrates that the only tools to establish diagnosis are the symptoms in people, and when the doctor is able to compare symptoms from patient to patient or with patients with one another. And so that's hands down what I have experienced as well, and that's what I've seen in our group, where when you've been around this toxin illness long enough, you start to see similarities in people's symptoms and you see patterns in the illness, and it's an amazing thing. Okay, so let's see here. Dr. Hristova's patients in the study, it's really important to know that this was a long-term study. She followed them for a period of 4 years, and imaging, lab tests, and results are all included in the study, and they're put in these awesome charts where you can see the patient age and every single breakdown of everything all in a row, and then you can compare them side by side with one another. That's all included there. And all patients experienced many symptoms and all had clinical effects from their injections. And the demographics are obviously of a female majority because we are looking at cosmetic use here. Then the article findings are summarized as per the body system that was adversely affected. And so I'm just going to do a quick rundown, and obviously this I'm summarizing from the study, so these are not my words. Just know that they're not mine, it's just a summary. So let's start with the central nervous system, and this is where patients often describe, and I hear this so often, that I am in a fog, I am in a bubble, I feel detached, my body is not listening to my brain, somebody else is operating my body. And then it lists the symptoms that go along with that. Okay, and then we have the peripheral nervous system, and the most common symptom of this is pain. A lot of people describe it as burning pain or just constant like pain. And also they might feel paresthesia in the limbs, in their face, torso, and buzzing in the nerves. And many times the pain is so severe that they describe it as crushing glass feeling or as a burning sensation, just really intense pain. And that is pain that persists 24/7. Okay, and then we have the autonomic nervous system, and those symptoms are primarily your breathing symptoms and your heart. So you may experience heart palpitations or an arrhythmia, or a lot of patients get diagnosed with SVT. I know my sister had to wear one of those Holter monitors for a number of days because they were so worried about the tachycardia that she was experiencing. She would be at rest and she was having heart rates in the 180 range, which is too high. It was too high for her age, and they call that SVT. Now, since my sister is much better now, the SVT symptoms have gone away. Chest pain, dizziness, and then the list for the autonomic nervous system goes on. Many patients describe that they feel as though they cannot take a deep breath, or that they are actually forgetting to breathe. They'll wake up gasping in the middle of the night for air. That's what would happen to my sister. She'd sit up in bed and think, oh my gosh, I'm dying, can't breathe. And then if you go down a little ways on our page, Chelsea, there's a firsthand story there where she has a lot of breathing symptoms, and as she's talking, you can hear just that she, you know, it's hard for her to breathe. She has a hard time with neck stability too. Then we also have psychiatric symptoms. The most common is severe anxiety and panic attacks, and this hands down is one of the things that I hear the most often, and to me indicates toxin spread. These are people who have never a day in their life had anxiety issues, and they either leave their appointments and just even a few minutes or a few hours after their appointment, they're thrown into a full-blown panic attack, and that's what happened to my sister. Let's see, so psychiatric panic attacks, feeling desperate and hopeless. There's just a sense that something is wrong and it is never going to be right. And there's just this feeling that their whole world has been completely absorbed by the disease. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch my sister's video health update video. It's a few posts back. I can help you locate it if you need. But she talks a little bit about the psychiatric symptoms that she experienced, and it's really interesting. She talks often about, and even still, how during that time she even feels guilty because she was just so self-absorbed. Like all she could think about was her illness. And then lastly, there's even some people who experience severe psychosis, and that is really a scary thing, you know, to hallucinate or to hear things that aren't there, see things that aren't there, or to have such an intense mental breakdown that you don't know who you are, you're not remembering things clearly, you may be displaying symptoms of like an amnesia type situation. So that is not unheard of. And then we also see hypothalamic syndrome, and the symptoms are usually manifest in like weight loss or insomnia. People's sleep and waking is affected. Their appetite has changed. I remember with Heidi that she described all foods, it didn't matter what she was eating, that they tasted like cardboard. You know, she did lose a pretty dramatic amount of weight. She started at a healthy 125 pounds, which is very healthy for her height. She's pretty short. And then within 8 weeks or so, she was, you know, just sitting right around 100 pounds. And so that's also a really, you know, scary thing to experience. Then of course, across the board, people experienced fatigue, lack of endurance, and major muscular issues. And that is one thing that in this study that was profound across the board. It was seen in every single person. And I remember for my sister, she described that fatigue as feeling like she had heavy weights on her legs, like attached to her legs. She would say that she was weighted, and that every step she took felt like these weights were like pushing her down into the floor. And it took just a significant amount of like mental energy for her to, you know, even go from one chair to another or to go up and down the stairs to do a load of laundry. It was really challenging. And then also this study shows people are experiencing a lot of atrophy, and that might be the patients experiencing skin changes, fat loss in their body, or specifically in their face, atrophy of the face, hair loss, and nail impairment. And that is also something that is really, really difficult for the people that I work with to experience. And I get sent pictures all the time, before and after pictures. Look at me before I had the injections and look at me now. What is happening to my face? Like that, I get that question so often because we see this atrophy happen quite commonly. And then also in this study, 75% of patients did have autoimmune markers for autoimmune syndromes. And, you know, those in this study are talked about briefly. I have seen people talk about rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia that they didn't have before. My sister was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. She never had that before, and she still to this day has issues with her thyroid. And so that's just something to note, that a lot of people who are getting ill from botulinum injections are then, even after they've healed a little bit, going on to develop significant autoimmune complications. Okay, so the study discusses other prominent findings such as increased infections, sensitivities to food and medications, and just the overall crisis that people are in when they experience this waxing and waning of their symptoms. And that is what I have seen as well with talking to people, is that it is incredibly challenging to work through this illness, because you will have periods of time where you're feeling relatively better, and then something will happen and it, you know, you might trigger another symptom and like push you into a full-blown relapse where you're every bit as sick as you were, you know, the day that the symptoms all started. And so that can be really hard for people. You know, they get this feeling and this sense that they are never going to be the same again. And I'll just summarize the rest of the findings in this study. It talks a little bit how it's very crucial to understand that this study demonstrates that generalized toxin spread does not necessarily happen on the first time that you get injections. It can happen later in subsequent injections. For example, patient number 7 had 30 successful treatments prior to getting ill, whereas 44% of the patients in this study fell ill after the very first time they were injected, and that would be the category, if my sister were in this study, that would be the category or the camp that she would be in. Those that had more than one injection, 50% of them did have an adverse event prior to the onset of severe symptoms. And so they were experiencing things, but they just were not connecting those things to the botulinum injections that they had had. And we see that all the study makes a note that before botulinum therapy, all of the patients were functional and highly active individuals prior to injections. They lived normal lifestyles, apart from one patient, number 4, and it pointed out that they did have a premorbid impairment. And that's good that they point that out. But all the other 15 people were completely healthy prior to injections. And in 100% of the patients, all disability occurred after botulinum therapy. One patient was even wheelchair bound for a year and a half, and the maximum disability duration is unknown for these people at the present. So mild and slow yearly improvements take place as the toxin clears the system. We can't say for sure whether or not all of these people made a full recovery. It's just simply not known. So my sister has made a near full recovery. She had one relapse between year 4.5 and 5, but since then she's been pretty much back to normal. I am working with some people who are 2 and 3 years out, still waiting for significant improvement in symptoms. And then there are some people who can process through the illness and the toxin and get significantly better in a year or less. And so it just really is different for everyone. And then the rest of the study discusses the patient's quality of life and how the symptoms were managed. And I'll let you guys check that part out on your own. But I do want to make a note that the last few pages of the study talk about possible management of symptoms. And if you are someone who is struggling with IBP, please don't follow the recommendations in this study because it was released in 2016 and we know so much more now than we did then. And so that wouldn't be the most up-to-date information. But if that's information you need, you are welcome to personally reach out to me and I will get you into our larger group and help you make that, show you where that information is so that you can connect with that to help manage your symptoms. I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to have from this study is that once botulinum goes systemic in your body and you have an onset of symptoms and you have iatrogenic botulism poisoning, that there is nothing that you can do or you can take to just make it go away overnight. There is no diagnostic test that you can take that's at least readily available that you can have or take to prove the illness that you have. It really just takes a lot of time and being patient with your body, and you can manage the symptoms, but you cannot, just magically make them go away. So I think that that is why we are here and why we want to convey the message to you, is we want people to be able to make an informed decision, to know that, yeah, this can happen to me. This is a risk should I decide to take botulinum injections. And so I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I will try to get through them.